Hi everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into the mysterious lost city of Atlantis, a city of canals, temples, and secrets hidden beneath the ocean for centuries. Stay with me as we explore its calm streets, quiet plazas, and the gentle rhythm of a civilization lost in time. If you enjoy this relaxing journey, smash that like button, leave a comment sharing your favorite part of Atlantis, and subscribe for more immersive history and mystery stories. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss a new calm adventure. Now, let's drift slowly into the story. The night settles softly over the quiet world, and as the rhythm of your breathing slows, the mind becomes open to distant memories carried by time itself, memories older than written language, older than kingdoms and borders, drifting like gentle waves across the deep ocean of history. And within those waves lives a name whispered for thousands of years, Atlantis, a city said to have risen in unmatched beauty and vanished in a single breath of catastrophe, not as a tale of fear but as a calm echo of human ambition, harmony, and fragile balance. And as you listen, allow the imagination to move slowly, without effort, as if floating across warm water under a starlit sky, approaching a distant island where mountains glowed softly in golden sunlight and wide canals reflected the clouds like polished mirrors, a place where time itself seemed to move more gently than anywhere else on Earth. Long before modern maps existed and before the oceans were measured by satellites and instruments, ancient storytellers spoke of lands beyond the known horizon, lands where nature and human design blended into perfect symmetry. And among these stories the philosopher Plato recorded a dialogue passed down through generations, describing a powerful island nation located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Atlantic Ocean opened into vast unknown waters, and there, according to the ancient account, stood a grand civilization gifted with fertile soil, fresh water springs, abundant forests, and mineral-rich mountains, a place where people lived not in haste but in steady rhythm with the seasons, guided by traditions that honored both wisdom and restraint. The city itself was said to be built in concentric circles of land and water, like ripples expanding from a single stone dropped into a still lake, with bridges connecting each ring and wide canals allowing ships to glide silently through the heart of the capital. And at the center stood a sacred hill where a great temple shimmered in white stone and warm metals, reflecting sunlight during the day and moonlight during the night, creating a gentle glow that could be seen from far across the sea. Not as a beacon of dominance but as a quiet symbol of order and balance, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of flowing water, distant bells, and slow footsteps on smooth stone paths. People in Atlantis were described as tall in spirit rather than in pride, skilled in craftsmanship, agriculture, navigation, and philosophy, and their homes were surrounded by gardens filled with flowering trees and calm pools where birds rested in the early morning light, and children learned not only numbers and language but patience, observation, and respect for the natural world, and elders told stories not to entertain but to guide the mind toward thoughtful living, creating a society where progress unfolded gently rather than forcefully, and where prosperity did not rush ahead of wisdom, allowing generations to grow without losing connection to their origins. As the days moved slowly across this imagined island, sunlight traveled across tiled rooftops and along quiet waterways where boats drifted without urgency, carrying fruits, grain, and handcrafted goods from one district to another, and merchants spoke in soft voices, not needing to compete or hurry, while musicians practiced melodies that echoed calmly across stone arches, and travelers arriving by sea felt a sense of peace long before they reached the harbor, as if the island itself welcomed them with steady breathing and warm stillness, inviting every visitor to slow down, to observe, and to rest within its gentle order. This was the beginning of the legend, not a story of disaster or loss yet, but a portrait of balance and calm strength, a civilization resting comfortably between human creativity and natural harmony. And as you continue listening, allow this peaceful image to settle in the mind, like a quiet dream forming slowly, because every great mystery begins not in chaos, but in calm perfection, waiting patiently for time to reveal its deeper layers. The morning light in Atlantis arrived slowly, not as a sudden brightness but as a gentle glow that slid across the curved waterways and rested softly upon the stone bridges, creating reflections that shimmered like quiet dreams upon the surface of the canals, and as the city awakened, the rhythm of life remained unhurried, guided by a deep understanding that time did not need to be chased, only experienced. And within this calm structure the architecture revealed its thoughtful design, where every ring of land and water served a purpose, allowing movement, trade, and communication to flow naturally without noise or congestion, and from above the city resembled a living pattern, breathing steadily in harmony with the surrounding sea and sky. The outermost ring held wide gardens and cultivated fields where grain moved gently in the breeze like soft waves, and farmers walked slowly between rows of crops, listening to birds and distant water, while irrigation channels carried fresh spring water from the mountains into every corner of the island, ensuring balance between nourishment and sustainability. And beyond the farms stood carefully placed forests where timber was harvested respectfully rather than aggressively, allowing the land to renew itself without strain, creating a cycle of growth that mirrored the slow and steady movement of nature itself. Moving inward, the next rings formed residential districts where homes were built with smooth stone, warm-colored metals, and polished wood, designed not for grandeur but for comfort and stability, and each home opened toward small gardens or water paths, allowing sunlight and fresh air to circulate freely, reducing heat and creating a constant sense of openness, and pathways curved gently rather than sharply, encouraging slow walking and quiet conversation, and in the evenings families gathered near lantern-lit terraces to share simple meals while listening to the distant flow of water, reinforcing the sense of collective calm. Bridges arched gracefully over the canals, wide enough for carts and pedestrians yet shaped with soft curves that blended into the city's natural flow, and beneath them boats glided almost silently, guided by experienced navigators who relied on subtle currents rather than forceful rowing, and small docks extended from each district, allowing goods to move efficiently without disturbing the tranquility of daily life, and the water itself was kept clean and clear through careful engineering and constant maintenance, reflecting both the sky above and the steady values of the people below. At the heart of the city stood the sacred central hill, rising gently rather than sharply, crowned by a temple that shimmered softly in daylight and glowed faintly beneath the moon, and the temple was not a place of loud ceremony but of quiet reflection, where citizens visited individually to pause, breathe, and reconnect with the larger rhythm of existence, and within its walls soft echoes of footsteps and whispered prayers blended into a calming acoustic presence that soothed the mind rather than stimulating it, reinforcing the philosophy that strength was found in stillness rather than noise. Surrounding the temple were halls of learning and archives where scholars preserved records of astronomy, agriculture, navigation, medicine, and philosophy, and students studied not under pressure but under guidance, encouraged to absorb knowledge patiently and thoughtfully, understanding that wisdom unfolded over time rather than through speed, and teachers emphasized balance between logic and intuition, ensuring that intellect remained connected to emotional awareness and ethical responsibility, shaping generations of calm and capable citizens. As the sun climbed higher and then slowly drifted westward, shadows moved gracefully across the circular streets, and the entire city seemed to breathe together in a synchronized rhythm, a living organism of stone, water, light, and human presence, and there was no sense of urgency or excess, only continuity and quiet purpose, as if Atlantis itself existed as a long, steady meditation upon the art of harmonious living, preserving peace not by force, but by thoughtful design and gentle discipline. This inner design of Atlantis formed the foundation of its legendary stability, a blueprint of order that allowed beauty to emerge naturally rather than aggressively, and as this image settles gently into the mind, the city remains suspended in a timeless calm, waiting patiently for the deeper layers of its story to unfold. As the gentle morning warmth continued to spread across Atlantis, the people moved into their daily rhythms with quiet intention, not driven by alarms or urgency but guided by the steady cycle of light, water, and natural sound, and the city responded softly to their presence, footsteps echoing lightly against smooth stone paths, distant birds weaving melody into the air, and the flowing canals carrying a constant whisper that calmed the mind and centered attention, creating an environment where every action felt unforced and naturally aligned with the pace of the surrounding world. Artisans opened their workshops slowly, allowing sunlight to enter through wide openings that illuminated polished tools and carefully arranged materials, and metalworkers shaped warm alloys into simple yet elegant forms, while stone carvers traced smooth patterns that reflected the circular harmony of the city's design, and textile weavers guided fine threads through wooden looms, producing fabrics that balanced durability with softness, and none of these tasks were rushed, because quality mattered more than speed, and the process itself was seen as a form of quiet meditation rather than labor. In nearby marketplaces, merchants arranged fruits, grains, herbs, and handcrafted goods with gentle care, speaking in calm voices and exchanging goods through respectful conversation rather than negotiation or pressure, and travelers arriving by sea were welcomed with water, shade, and guidance before business was discussed, reinforcing the cultural belief that human connection preceded transaction, and the atmosphere of the market remained peaceful even during the busiest hours, supported by thoughtful design that allowed space, airflow, and natural light to maintain comfort and clarity. Children attended learning gardens rather than enclosed classrooms, where teachers guided them through observation of plants, stars, weather patterns, and simple mathematics using stones, leaves, and flowing water as natural tools of understanding, and lessons emphasized patience, curiosity, and cooperation rather than competition, allowing each child to develop awareness of both self and environment. And storytelling remained central to education, not as fantasy but as symbolic guidance, teaching emotional balance, ethical responsibility, and long-term thinking through calm narrative traditions. Meals were shared slowly, often outdoors beneath shaded terraces or near quiet water channels, where families prepared simple food sourced directly from nearby farms and orchards, and eating was treated as a mindful ritual rather than a hurried necessity, allowing conversation to flow gently and digestion to align naturally with the body's rhythm, and elders often joined younger generations during these meals, offering perspective and memory without authority or dominance, reinforcing continuity between past and present. Music drifted softly through the city in the late afternoon, not in performance halls but along open walkways and garden spaces, where string instruments and low-toned flutes produced slow melodies that echoed lightly against stone surfaces and blended seamlessly with the sound of water, and these harmonies were intended not for applause but for atmosphere, creating emotional balance and subtle relaxation throughout the community, supporting both mental clarity and restful transition toward evening. As daylight faded into warm twilight, lamps were lit gradually along bridges and pathways, reflecting golden ripples upon the canals, and people returned calmly to their homes, closing the day without exhaustion or overstimulation, allowing the mind to unwind naturally, and windows glowed softly across the circular districts, resembling a constellation mirrored upon the earth, while the stars slowly emerged overhead, reinforcing the quiet connection between human life and the vast universe beyond. This steady human rhythm formed the emotional heartbeat of Atlantis, a society not defined by speed or dominance but by alignment, patience, and awareness, and within this calm continuity the city rested peacefully, unaware that far beyond its tranquil surface, subtle changes were beginning to stir within the deeper currents of time. Over many generations, the calm stability of Atlantis gradually produced abundance, not through conquest or pressure but through consistency, careful planning, and respect for natural cycles, and the island's fertile soil continued to yield generous harvests, while its skilled artisans refined techniques that allowed tools, vessels, and architectural elements to last longer with minimal waste, creating a surplus that encouraged thoughtful exchange with distant coastal communities rather than aggressive expansion, and ships began traveling beyond familiar waters, guided by precise star navigation and steady ocean currents, carrying goods, knowledge, and peaceful intention across the open sea. The Atlantean fleet was designed not for intimidation but for endurance and balance, with wide hulls that moved smoothly across waves and sails optimized for long journeys rather than speed, allowing crews to rest adequately and maintain physical health during extended voyages, and onboard routines followed structured calm cycles of work, observation, shared meals, and silent reflection, ensuring that travel itself remained an extension of the island's peaceful culture rather than a source of stress or conflict. Trade routes slowly connected Atlantis with neighboring lands, where spices, rare stones, metals, and agricultural seeds were exchanged alongside stories, techniques, and philosophies, and the influence of Atlantean balance gently reached distant ports, where local communities adopted irrigation methods, architectural concepts, and cooperative learning structures without surrendering their own identities, creating a network of mutual respect rather than dominance, and these relationships strengthened resilience across regions without creating dependency or hierarchy. Wealth accumulated steadily within Atlantis, not as concentrated power but as shared infrastructure, expanding public gardens, improving water systems, reinforcing bridges, and enhancing learning centers, and the Leadership Council carefully monitored resource flow to avoid imbalance, ensuring that no district grew excessively while others declined, and policies emphasized long-term sustainability rather than short-term gain, reinforcing the cultural belief that prosperity must serve collective stability rather than individual accumulation. As generations passed, the island's reputation grew quietly across the seas, described by travelers as a place of remarkable order, calm intelligence, and gentle innovation, and while admiration increased, subtle shifts began to emerge within certain segments of the population, where pride slowly replaced humility, and success gradually transformed into expectation rather than gratitude. And some voices within the council began advocating for faster growth, broader influence, and stronger projection of Atlantean capability, suggesting that leadership beyond the island could ensure permanent security and recognition. These ideas did not arrive suddenly or aggressively, but gently, almost unnoticed, framed as protection and progress rather than ambition, and new shipyards expanded slightly beyond necessity, while certain architectural projects leaned toward visual impressiveness rather than functional harmony, and although the majority of citizens remained grounded in tradition, the quiet seed of comparison had been planted, measuring success against external validation rather than internal balance, subtly shifting the emotional foundation of the culture. The sea itself continued to respond calmly, winds remained predictable, harvests remained steady, and daily life preserved its gentle rhythm, masking the early signs of internal imbalance, and because change unfolded slowly, few recognized its significance, trusting that the stability which had lasted for centuries would naturally continue without adjustment, unaware that systems rooted in harmony require continuous awareness and humility to remain aligned. Thus Atlantis stood at the height of its prosperity, luminous and admired, yet quietly drifting away from the stillness that had once anchored its strength, like a calm vessel slowly shifting its course under invisible currents, setting the stage for transformations that would unfold not through immediate conflict, but through gradual internal evolution. As prosperity continued to expand across Atlantis, the rhythm of life remained outwardly calm, yet beneath the smooth surface of routine, small shifts in attitude and intention slowly altered the inner balance of the society, and traditions that once emphasized restraint began to soften, allowing comfort to replace discipline and convenience to replace mindful effort, and while these changes appeared harmless, they subtly weakened the cultural foundations that had sustained harmony for generations. New architectural projects gradually favored visual grandeur rather than environmental integration, introducing taller structures and wider ceremonial spaces that reflected status rather than necessity. And although these buildings remained elegant, their purpose leaned toward impression rather than function, and maintenance demands increased quietly, placing additional strain on labor systems and material resources. Yet the visual success of these projects masked their long-term impact on sustainability. In governance, council discussions shifted from preservation toward influence, exploring opportunities to formalize trade dominance, regulate external territories, and secure strategic maritime advantages, and while these proposals were framed as protective measures, they introduced hierarchical thinking into a culture that had historically prioritized equality and cooperation, and subtle competition emerged among leaders seeking recognition rather than quiet service, altering decision-making dynamics without dramatic conflict. Environmental signals began appearing gently, not as disasters but as irregular patterns, including slight changes in tidal behavior, minor tremors beneath the earth, and subtle temperature fluctuations within certain water channels, and these indicators were documented by scholars yet interpreted as natural cycles rather than warnings, reinforcing a sense of reassurance that discouraged deeper investigation or preventative adaptation. The spiritual centers remained active, but attendance slowly shifted from reflective practice toward symbolic ritual, and moments of silent contemplation became shorter and less frequent, replaced by structured ceremonies that preserved appearance rather than internal alignment, and although no immediate harm resulted, the emotional grounding of the population gradually weakened, reducing collective sensitivity to imbalance and early warning signals. Daily life maintained comfort and abundance, markets remained full, music continued drifting through the streets, and travelers still spoke of Atlantis with admiration, yet interpersonal interaction subtly changed, with increased comparison of status, property, and influence, and although politeness remained intact, the deeper sense of shared simplicity faded gently into the background, replaced by quiet personal aspiration. The natural landscape responded subtly as well, with certain springs producing slightly altered mineral content, small shifts in coastal sediment patterns, and occasional unusual marine behavior observed by fishermen, yet these observations remained isolated and unconnected, lacking urgency due to the long-standing stability of the region, and confidence in past success overshadowed attentiveness to emerging patterns. Thus the decline of Atlantis did not announce itself through visible collapse or chaos, but through gradual misalignment between intention and awareness, like a slow drift away from center, unnoticed because motion remained smooth and comfortable, and the island continued glowing peacefully beneath the sun and stars, unaware that its foundation was quietly loosening beneath the surface of calm continuity. As time continued unfolding across the quiet beauty of Atlantis, the island remained wrapped in familiar comfort, yet the deeper layers of the natural world began adjusting in subtle and interconnected ways that extended far beyond immediate human perception, and beneath the stable stone foundations and gently flowing canals, slow tectonic movements shifted ancient plates that had rested in balance for centuries, releasing minute vibrations that traveled silently through bedrock and mineral veins, unnoticed by daily activity yet steadily altering the structural equilibrium of the land itself. The ocean currents surrounding the island gradually changed their seasonal behavior, introducing slightly cooler flows from deeper waters and altering nutrient distribution along the coastal reefs, influencing marine life migration patterns and creating small fluctuations in fish populations that fishermen quietly observed without alarm, attributing these changes to ordinary seasonal variation rather than long-term environmental transition, and the sea maintained its gentle appearance, masking the complex dynamics unfolding beneath its reflective surface. Atmospheric conditions responded slowly as well, with wind patterns adjusting their trajectories across the open Atlantic, bringing occasional variations in humidity and cloud formation that subtly influenced rainfall timing and evaporation rates, and although crops continued growing successfully, certain harvest cycles required increased irrigation attention, prompting engineers to fine-tune canal flow systems, reinforcing the illusion that human management could compensate for any environmental irregularity without deeper systemic awareness. Within the city, scholars continued recording astronomical movements, seismic microactivity, and tidal variations, compiling detailed data sets within the archives, yet institutional confidence in long-standing models limited interpretive flexibility, and deviations were often categorized as statistical noise rather than early indicators of structural change, reflecting a cognitive bias toward continuity that discouraged proactive adaptation, despite the growing volume of small anomalies accumulating quietly across multiple observational disciplines. The geological foundation beneath the central plateau experienced gradual pressure redistribution as subterranean water reservoirs shifted their volume and flow direction, weakening certain sediment layers and increasing susceptibility to displacement during external stress events, and these processes unfolded over decades rather than days, making them imperceptible without integrated analysis across engineering, hydrology, and geology, disciplines that remained compartmentalized within separate academic councils rather than collaboratively synthesized. Marine fauna exhibited subtle behavioral changes, including altered breeding locations, deeper diving patterns among certain species, and increased nocturnal surface activity observed by coastal observers, yet cultural interpretation framed these phenomena as cyclical mysteries rather than environmental messaging, reinforcing psychological distance between human systems and natural feedback mechanisms, further reducing sensitivity to cumulative signals. Even within the human nervous system, the environment's microvariations influenced sleep patterns slightly, producing marginal increases in restlessness during certain lunar phases, though such effects remained within comfortable tolerance thresholds and were rarely documented formally, illustrating how biological systems often register change before conscious awareness translates sensation into actionable understanding. As decades passed, the accumulated microadjustments across tectonic, oceanic, atmospheric, ecological, and biological systems gradually synchronized into a broader phase shift, forming a latent instability that awaited only a moderate catalytic trigger rather than catastrophic immediate force. And this transitional state resembled a calm lake whose surface remained smooth while deeper currents quietly rearranged thermal layers and pressure gradients beneath apparent stillness. The island's infrastructure, though resilient and well-maintained, gradually experienced cumulative stress across bridge joints, canal embankments, and subterranean conduits, where microscopic fractures expanded incrementally through repeated thermal expansion cycles and minor seismic vibrations, and maintenance protocols addressed visible where yet remained insufficient to counter long-term foundational stress accumulation that required systemic redesign rather than localized repair. Culturally, the society continued prioritizing comfort, efficiency, and outward stability, unintentionally reinforcing a feedback loop that delayed strategic reassessment, and institutional inertia preserved familiar operational frameworks while environmental conditions quietly exceeded the original design parameters that had supported centuries of equilibrium, illustrating how success itself can become a limiting factor when adaptability remains underutilized. Despite these evolving complexities, daily sensory experience within Atlantis remained largely tranquil. Sunlight continued reflecting warmly off stone and water, music still echoed softly through gardens, and trade routes maintained reliable schedules, preserving psychological normalcy and masking the approaching transition threshold that slowly narrowed the margin for corrective intervention. Thus the long turning of nature progressed invisibly beneath the calm surface of civilization, weaving together countless small variables into a converging trajectory, not as punishment or chaos, but as the natural consequence of interconnected systems drifting beyond synchronized alignment, patiently awaiting the moment when accumulated imbalance would gently but irrevocably express itself through visible transformation. The transition did not announce itself with immediate violence or overwhelming noise, but rather with a subtle alteration in the texture of silence itself, as if the air carried a faint tension that sensitive minds registered without conscious interpretation, and the evening descended upon Atlantis with familiar calm, lanterns illuminating bridges and pathways, gentle conversations fading into quiet rest, and the canals reflecting soft moonlight like slow-moving silver threads, maintaining the illusion of stability even as deep subterranean forces quietly aligned toward release. Beneath the island's foundation, tectonic pressure that had accumulated over decades finally crossed a threshold where internal resistance could no longer absorb redistribution forces, and mineral strata began shifting along microfault lines, generating low-frequency vibrations that traveled through stone and water with minimal audible expression, producing slight oscillations within architectural structures and subtle ripples across canal surfaces that resembled natural wave patterns rather than immediate warning signals. Within residential districts, sleeping citizens experienced faint sensations of motion that blended seamlessly into dream states, interpreted subconsciously as drifting or floating imagery rather than physical displacement, demonstrating how the nervous system often normalizes gradual environmental changes during rest cycles, maintaining psychological continuity even as physical parameters evolve. The first measurable structural response occurred within subterranean water channels, where pressure fluctuations altered flow velocity and direction, creating localized surges that stressed containment boundaries and gradually displaced sediment layers supporting canal embankments, yet surface indicators remained visually subtle, preventing rapid human detection or coordinated response. As the geological adjustment continued propagating outward, a secondary effect emerged along coastal margins where seabed elevation experienced slight depression, allowing denser oceanic water to move inward toward previously stable shoreline gradients, generating slow-moving tidal elevation shifts rather than abrupt wave action, and the sea maintained its calm reflective appearance while volume redistribution quietly progressed. Atmospheric pressure systems responded in parallel through minute barometric fluctuations that influenced wind direction and humidity levels, subtly thickening coastal air density and increasing moisture retention, contributing to a slightly heavier sensory environment that remained within comfortable tolerance yet signaled deeper systemic coupling across environmental domains. Within the Central Plateau, sediment compression produced localized subsidence zones beneath certain architectural sectors, gradually altering load distribution across bridge supports and foundation pillars, and although structures remained intact, internal stress reached near maximum tolerance levels, creating a delicate equilibrium that could shift rapidly under additional external input. The process unfolded over hours rather than minutes, allowing cumulative effects to synchronize gradually rather than catastrophically, and the city continued sleeping peacefully as interconnected systems approached convergence, illustrating how large-scale transitions often manifest silently before becoming perceptible through visible expression. At a critical point shortly before dawn, a deeper tectonic adjustment propagated through the underlying plate boundary, releasing a low-amplitude yet wide-area displacement that transmitted kinetic energy upward into the island's base, causing a slow undulating motion similar to a long ocean swell rather than sharp seismic shock, gently destabilizing soil cohesion and water containment structures simultaneously. Canal water levels began rising incrementally beyond standard tolerance margins, overtopping low embankments and seeping into adjacent walkways, while coastal waterline advanced slowly inland across shallow gradients, flooding peripheral gardens and storage zones without immediate destructive force, creating a gradual but persistent encroachment rather than sudden inundation. Citizens awakened gradually as environmental cues exceeded subconscious filtering thresholds, noticing unusual water placement, soft structural creaking, and altered acoustic resonance within enclosed spaces, yet panic remained minimal due to the absence of violent stimuli, allowing orderly movement toward elevated sectors as trained emergency protocols initiated calmly. The island's engineering systems responded automatically through pressure release channels and secondary drainage pathways, temporarily stabilizing certain districts, yet the cumulative volume of water influx and foundational displacement exceeded long-term design limits, rendering full containment unsustainable despite effective short-term mitigation. As sunrise approached, the horizon revealed subtle but undeniable transformation, where water coverage extended beyond historical boundaries and low-lying districts reflected the sky like newly formed lakes, signaling that Atlantis had entered an irreversible transitional phase rather than experiencing a temporary anomaly. Thus the night of shifting earth and rising water marked not the dramatic collapse of legend, but the quiet crossing of systemic thresholds where stability gradually yielded to persistent environmental realignment, unfolding with measured continuity rather than sudden catastrophe, allowing the story of Atlantis to move gently yet decisively into its final transformation. As daylight strengthened across the altered horizon, Atlantis no longer resembled the perfectly balanced city of memory, yet the transformation continued without chaos, unfolding through steady physical law rather than emotional drama, and water advanced methodically into lower districts, filling courtyards, workshops, and garden pathways with reflective stillness, while citizens relocated essential materials toward higher elevations with quiet coordination, guided by practiced emergency frameworks that prioritized safety and clarity rather than panic or urgency. The Central Plateau remained temporarily stable, serving as a refuge for remaining population clusters and governance coordination, while peripheral zones transitioned fully into shallow inland waterways, converting familiar streets into slow-moving canals that mirrored the sky and surrounding architecture, creating an unfamiliar yet strangely tranquil visual continuity that softened psychological stress responses. Marine currents continued adjusting along newly formed coastal contours, redistributing sediment and gradually undermining remaining embankments through persistent hydraulic pressure rather than sudden force, and as foundational layers loosened, structural elements settled slowly into new equilibrium positions, producing gentle acoustic resonance rather than abrupt collapse, reinforcing the gradual nature of transformation. Long-term hydrological feedback loops accelerated as groundwater reservoirs interconnected with surface flooding zones, increasing subsurface saturation and reducing soil-bearing capacity across broader regions, amplifying the island's susceptibility to progressive subsidence without requiring additional seismic input. And each incremental adjustment propagated further water redistribution into previously unaffected districts. Over successive tidal cycles, the ocean's natural oscillation gradually synchronized with the island's internal water displacement, creating a steady inward migration of marine volume that exceeded evaporation and drainage capacity, ultimately establishing a persistent submergence trend that could not be reversed through engineering intervention alone, confirming that Atlantis had crossed from adaptive challenge into permanent geological transition. Population evacuation occurred gradually across multiple days, utilizing remaining navigable channels and stabilized docking corridors, and vessels departed in organized sequences toward neighboring coastal territories where pre-existing trade alliances facilitated humanitarian reception and settlement integration, preserving cultural continuity despite physical displacement of homeland infrastructure. Those who remained temporarily within the central elevation zones observed the slow disappearance of familiar landmarks beneath rising reflective surfaces, where rooftops gradually dissolved into shimmering patterns beneath sunlight and moonlight, and the emotional response remained subdued and contemplative rather than dramatic, reflecting cultural conditioning toward acceptance of natural process rather than resistance. Archival materials, symbolic artifacts, and core knowledge repositories were prioritized for transport and duplication, ensuring intellectual heritage preservation despite geographic loss, and multiple documentation teams encoded historical narratives into portable formats designed for long-term transmission across generations and regions, anticipating that future societies might reconstruct the memory of Atlantis through fragmented yet persistent oral and written traditions. As the final elevated structures approached saturation thresholds, evacuation completed fully, leaving the remaining stone frameworks exposed briefly above waterline before progressive submergence stabilized into a new shallow marine plateau, where coral colonization, sediment deposition, and ecological succession gradually integrated the submerged city into the broader oceanic system. Silence returned to the former island, not as absence but as transformed presence, where currents flowed through empty archways and fish navigated former corridors, and sunlight filtered through clear water columns onto tiled surfaces, preserving faint geometric patterns beneath shifting refractive light, creating a quiet underwater memory rather than erasure. Over centuries, tectonic stability returned, sediment layers accumulated, and surface water patterns normalized, concealing visible traces of human construction beneath natural formations, while subtle anomalies persisted within bathymetric mapping and mineral composition, offering faint signatures detectable only through advanced observation. The sea carried the memory of Atlantis not as story or emotion, but as physical imprint embedded within layered geology, preserved silently until distant generations would once again sense curiosity toward the unexplained, allowing myth and inquiry to converge gently across time rather than through dramatic rediscovery. Thus Atlantis transitioned from inhabited civilization into submerged historical echo, not through violent annihilation but through gradual integration into planetary systems, leaving behind a quiet resonance that continues drifting within human imagination like a distant tide moving endlessly beneath conscious awareness. Long after Atlantis disappeared beneath the calm surface of the Atlantic Ocean, human curiosity continued to reach across centuries, guided by imagination, fragmented accounts, and scholarly inquiry, and the legend persisted not merely as story, but as a persistent question encoded into cultural consciousness, inspiring exploration, philosophical reflection, and subtle wonder that connected disparate societies through shared fascination. Classical texts, especially the dialogues of Plato, remained primary sources, describing not only geographical placement but also the ethical and societal principles that characterized the island, and scholars debated the literal versus symbolic significance of these records, analyzing architectural descriptions, concentric layouts, and accounts of daily life as potential clues to real locations or as allegorical teaching devices illustrating balance, ambition, and human vulnerability. Geographers, oceanographers, and archaeologists over centuries proposed various sites for Atlantis, from submerged Mediterranean locations to regions beyond the Pillars of Hercules, using bathymetric mapping, sediment analysis, and remote sensing technology to identify anomalies consistent with ancient construction, yet none matched all recorded criteria fully, maintaining the balance between possibility and mystery, and allowing the legend to endure in a state of partial resolution. Scientific models considered plate tectonics, sea level changes, and glacial cycles, hypothesizing that gradual geological shifts could account for localized submergence without requiring catastrophic collapse, echoing the subtle mechanisms previously imagined in the story's historical reconstruction, and aligning natural observation with cultural narrative, blending physical reality with mythic imagination in ways that inspired both rigorous study and speculative thought. Psychological and cultural analyses suggested that Atlantis functioned as a metaphor for human aspiration, societal balance, and moral caution, and even if physical remains remained elusive, the concept influenced literature, art, philosophy, and governance models across civilizations, serving as a reminder that societal collapse and environmental change are often gradual processes, quietly integrating with long-term human experience rather than erupting as sudden events. Modern explorers and divers occasionally identify underwater structures, column remnants, or geometric anomalies, generating intrigue and cautious excitement, yet the majority of these observations remain inconclusive, reinforcing the pattern of measured, patient investigation, mirroring the slow rhythms of historical submergence rather than dramatic revelation, and continuing the tradition of blending curiosity with contemplation rather than urgent pursuit. Atlantis thus persists in the collective imagination as a quiet paradox, representing both loss and memory, aspiration and warning, integration and disappearance, and the legend continues to ripple through human thought, inspiring careful reflection on the interconnectedness of society, environment, and the passage of time, and reminding every listener that subtle shifts often precede visible transformation, and that calm observation can yield insight as profound as dramatic upheaval. The echoes of Atlantis in literature, cartography, and scholarship serve not merely as entertainment, but as enduring testaments to human fascination with balance, perfection, and the limits of control, and as this story drifts through consciousness, it encourages gentle meditation on temporality, mortality, and the ongoing dialogue between human action and natural forces, providing a tranquil yet expansive landscape for the mind to explore while remaining anchored in quiet narrative rhythm. Thus the city continues to live, not above water, but within the resonance of imagination, memory, and inquiry, forming a silent bridge between ancient human endeavor and modern curiosity, where thought and story converge as gently as tides on a calm shore, leaving space for reflection, understanding, and the serene appreciation of mystery sustained across the ages. As you listen, let this knowledge settle softly in your mind, blending seamlessly with the quiet pace of your breathing, and imagine that the waters above the sunken city reflect both the light of stars and the echoes of human achievement, preserving Atlantis not as a monument to loss, but as an enduring presence that continues shaping thought, wonder, and peaceful contemplation even centuries after its disappearance beneath the ocean's gentle waves. Now, as the mind drifts slowly through the long memory of Atlantis, allow each image to merge seamlessly with calm awareness, and imagine the submerged city lying beneath clear, quiet waters, where sunlight filters gently through liquid columns, illuminating smooth stonework, arches, and remnants of canals as if preserving a frozen moment of human intention within the embrace of nature, and every detail whispers not of fear or loss, but of harmony, balance, and subtle transformation. The story of Atlantis is neither fully revealed nor completely hidden, it exists in the spaces between certainty and imagination, where questions carry as much value as answers, and where the rhythm of inquiry itself becomes a meditation, inviting the mind to move slowly through curiosity, reflection, and quiet wonder, without urgency or expectation, like drifting over soft waves under an endless night sky. As waves continue their gentle dance above the sunken city, marine life integrates with the stone foundations, coral spreads across tiled surfaces, and sediments layer softly atop former streets, illustrating the natural integration of human design and environmental processes over time, and each ripple, each shift in water, mirrors the slow unfolding of history, memory, and myth, showing how continuity persists even when form transforms. Human memory preserves Atlantis not only through written records, art, and philosophy, but also through the enduring impact of its symbolic lessons, reminding societies across generations to balance ambition with restraint, growth with sustainability, and innovation with respect for natural rhythms, and even in centuries to come, listeners, scholars, and dreamers will continue to sense its quiet influence as a model of patience, harmony, and thoughtful living. Now let your mind trace the concentric circles of the city once more, following canals and bridges, gardens and plazas, temples and archives, moving slowly inward to the sacred heart of reflection, and feel the gentle rise and fall of water as if breathing alongside you, aligning the rhythm of your body with the slow pulse of Atlantis, allowing awareness to rest effortlessly, anchored in calm observation and quiet meditation. Every whispered story, every subtle trace of the past, and every reflection upon human aspiration flows gently into the present moment, and as this narrative concludes, allow a sense of completion to settle without abruptness, like the final ripple fading across a still pond, leaving space for rest, deep contemplation, and peaceful absorption of memory, imagination, and insight. Atlantis exists now as both lesson and legend, neither lost nor entirely present, a city submerged yet alive in quiet consciousness, inviting each listener to dwell in reflection, embrace patience, and perceive the interconnectedness of human action and natural processes, offering a final moment of gentle awareness, mystery, and tranquility before the mind drifts fully into rest. And so, with the sunken city beneath calm waters, the gentle flow of time above, and your own steady breathing as witness, let the story of Atlantis dissolve softly into your consciousness, leaving behind only serene understanding, timeless curiosity, and the peaceful echo of a civilization that moved gracefully between human intention and the enduring forces of nature, providing a perfect closure for sleep, meditation, and reflective imagination. The city of Atlantis, viewed from above in the imagination, reveals a structure of meticulous balance and careful thought, where concentric rings of land and water form a gentle rhythm, like soft waves radiating outward across a calm pond. The outermost ring contains fertile fields, orchards, and gardens, each cultivated with patience and intention, allowing crops to grow in harmony with the rhythms of the sun, wind, and water. Farmers walk slowly between the rows of plants, noticing every subtle movement, every whisper of wind, every shift of sunlight on leaves, tending the soil as if participating in a quiet meditation, understanding that life unfolds best when guided by awareness rather than urgency. Canals run smoothly through the city, connecting each ring with curved bridges designed not for speed but for ease and continuity. Boats drift along these waterways, propelled by gentle currents or careful rowing, their movement synchronized with the rhythm of water itself. Every bridge, canal, and pathway is positioned to encourage slow movement, calm reflection, and seamless interaction between spaces, ensuring that travel through the city never feels rushed, chaotic, or stressful. Even the sounds of daily life, footsteps, the faint clink of tools, distant laughter, blend harmoniously with the ambient resonance of water flowing against stone embankments, reinforcing a subtle, continuous sense of balance. The next ring houses residential districts, where homes are designed with curved walls, open courtyards, and garden spaces, allowing light and air to move freely. Roofs shimmer softly in early morning light, reflecting the sun without glare, and terraces open to canals or shaded paths, encouraging residents to pause, observe, and breathe deeply. Within each home, daily activities, preparing meals, crafting tools, weaving textiles, and teaching children, are performed slowly, with mindful attention to process and form, not haste or competition. The city's architecture mirrors the philosophy of its people, that beauty arises naturally when function, balance, and aesthetics coexist, and when every action is taken deliberately rather than impulsively. At the city's heart rises a gentle hill crowned by the sacred temple, a structure that seems to glow faintly under sunlight and moonlight, projecting calm rather than dominance. Its walls are polished stone and soft metals, cool to the touch and warm to the eye. Within, corridors echo softly with footsteps, whispers, and the slow rhythm of ceremonial reflection. Citizens visit the temple individually or in quiet groups, seeking balance, insight, or connection to the larger forces of nature that govern both land and sea. The temple's design encourages slowness, long corridors, curved chambers, open courtyards, and shallow steps ensure that movement through the space is never hurried, allowing the body and mind to adjust naturally to the stillness it promotes. Surrounding the temple are halls of learning, libraries, and observation chambers, where knowledge of astronomy, agriculture, navigation, medicine, and philosophy is preserved meticulously. Students wander through open courtyards, observing stars, plants, and water currents as living lessons. Instruction is gentle and patient, emphasizing long-term understanding rather than short-term memorization. Teachers guide observation with soft words, gestures, and storytelling, and every lesson is intertwined with reflection, encouraging mindfulness and calm analysis. The city itself acts as an extension of learning, a living laboratory where the environment, architecture, and culture work together to reinforce awareness, patience, and harmony. Throughout Atlantis, soft paths wind through gardens, marketplaces, and plazas, their curves guiding the eye gently rather than abruptly, and every corner presents a visual balance, water reflecting sky, greenery framing stone, birds moving lightly overhead, and distant bells or wind chimes adding subtle rhythm to the atmosphere. Even commerce follows this gentle pace. Traders exchange goods without haste or competition, conversations are soft and deliberate, and transactions occur with quiet mutual understanding, reinforcing the cultural principle that human interaction should mirror the calm and measured rhythms of nature. As the sun slowly arcs across the sky, light spreads over tiled rooftops, water surfaces, and cobblestone pathways, shifting in color and intensity with the day's passage, and the city responds naturally, shadows lengthening gradually, surfaces warming and cooling, and residents adjusting their pace in harmony with environmental cues. Evening brings lanterns that glow softly along pathways, bridges, and water edges, reflecting in the canals like elongated streaks of starlight. Music drifts across open spaces, low strings, wind instruments, and gentle percussion form melodies without haste or insistence, blending with water, wind, and the faint rustle of leaves to create an auditory landscape designed to calm and center attention. By nightfall, the city itself seems to inhale and exhale with the rhythm of the inhabitants, the canals glimmering under moonlight, the soft sounds of water and footsteps merging into a continuous, soothing pattern. Every bridge, garden, courtyard, and canal reflects the philosophy of Atlantis. Life is meant to be lived in alignment with natural rhythms, with careful attention, calm curiosity, and patient awareness. In this extended stillness, the mind begins to move slowly with the city, following canals, walking terraces, gliding across reflections, and breathing in sync with the measured pace of life. The inner design of Atlantis forms the foundation for all that is to come, a calm, enduring framework of harmony, patience, and thoughtful living, awaiting the unfolding story of civilization, prosperity, subtle shifts, and the eventual transformation that lies far in the future. Morning unfolds slowly in Atlantis, not with abrupt light or sudden activity, but as a gentle illumination that spreads evenly across rooftops, gardens, and canals, inviting the inhabitants to awaken with the soft rhythm of the day. Citizens rise quietly, stretching and moving with intention, their steps measured, their voices soft, creating a harmonious balance with the environment that surrounds them. The city itself responds, water in the canals rippling lightly as boats begin to glide, leaves in the garden swaying subtly with the morning breeze, and birdsong floating gently over open plazas, blending seamlessly into a natural, peaceful chorus. In the outer districts, farmers move through the fields with calm attention, inspecting each plant and tree with patient hands, observing the soil, the moisture, and the growth of leaves and fruit. Irrigation channels carry fresh spring water in slow, deliberate flow, nourishing every section of land evenly, while canals connecting these agricultural rings allow small boats to transport tools, seeds, and harvest in quiet synchronization with the rhythm of daily life. Farmers speak softly among themselves, sharing observations and techniques without haste, their words measured to preserve calm and focus, and the overall pace of work is guided by the natural cycles of sunlight and water, rather than imposed schedules. Artisans begin their tasks at similar gentle rhythms. Stone carvers trace smooth, flowing patterns, shaping each block with care and mindfulness. Metalworkers bend and polish alloys, feeling the subtle resistance of materials beneath their fingertips. Textile weavers guide threads through looms with steady hands, producing fabrics of both beauty and utility. Every movement is intentional, every action considered, and the sounds of tools and processes blend into the ambient harmony of the city, contributing to the continuous, calming soundscape rather than interrupting it. In learning gardens and open courtyards, children move with guided curiosity. Teachers lead observation exercises, pointing out patterns in plant growth, the movement of water, the trajectories of birds, and the subtle shifts in sunlight across tiled surfaces. Lessons are never rushed. Children are encouraged to notice details, reflect, and draw their own conclusions, understanding that knowledge is acquired gradually and fully only through sustained attention and mindful practice. Storytelling is woven into daily education, blending observation, myth, and moral reflection to foster patience, awareness, and a deep sense of connection with the environment and the larger rhythms of life. Marketplaces operate gently, without the noise or hurry found in other civilizations. Traders arrange fruits, grains, herbs, and crafted goods with care, conversing in soft tones, exchanging products through mutual understanding rather than pressure. Travelers arriving by sea are greeted patiently, shown pathways to docks and provisions, and allowed to acclimate to the city's calm rhythm before engaging in trade. This intentional pace preserves tranquility, reduces stress, and allows every interaction to become a mindful, shared experience rather than a hurried transaction. Meals are shared slowly, often outdoors, where families gather beneath shade or along canal edges. Food is simple but nourishing, harvested locally, prepared thoughtfully, and consumed in quiet reflection. Conversation flows naturally, without urgency or distraction, and elders impart stories, guidance, and gentle counsel, fostering continuity and reinforcing the cultural values of patience, balance, and connection. Music drifts in the background, unhurried, with soft instruments producing melodies that complement the ambient sound of water and wind, encouraging reflection and calm rather than attention or excitement. Throughout the day, the inhabitants move in alignment with natural cues. The sun's passage alters light and shadow gradually, guiding the pace of activity, and residents adjust their efforts, rest, and recreation accordingly. Work, study, play, and meditation intertwine seamlessly, forming a continuous cycle that nourishes mind, body, and spirit. Even as small challenges arise, slight weather variations, minor maintenance tasks, or the need for coordination among districts, the response is deliberate, careful, and measured, maintaining a pervasive sense of equilibrium across the city. As evening approaches, light softens, lanterns are lit along pathways, and reflections shimmer across the canals, creating a visual rhythm that mirrors the soft auditory landscape of gentle footsteps, flowing water, and distant conversation. Music continues, blending harmoniously with natural sound, and residents begin transitioning into rest, stretching, breathing, and winding down their activities in preparation for sleep. The city itself seems to exhale slowly, settling into night, ready to resume the steady, harmonious rhythm with the next sunrise. In this way, daily life in Atlantis becomes a meditation in motion, a society structured to move slowly, consciously, and harmoniously, encouraging its citizens to align with the subtle rhythms of nature, to nurture observation and patience, and to experience every aspect of life as a continuous, deliberate, and soothing flow. Over generations, the calm, balanced life of Atlantis naturally produced prosperity, but unlike other civilizations, this abundance was cultivated patiently, deliberately, and with a deep respect for natural cycles. Crops flourished in well-maintained fields, orchards yielded fruit in generous quantity, and freshwater channels nourished both soil and city with steady, harmonious flow. Artisans refined their skills slowly over decades, producing durable tools, vessels, and structures that would last for generations. The city's wealth was thus not sudden or flashy, but quietly accumulated, reinforcing stability and balance rather than stimulating hurried growth or competition. With abundance came opportunity, and the Atlanteans began to explore beyond the familiar coastline, sending carefully crafted ships into the wider sea. These vessels were built for endurance, harmony, and balance rather than speed, with hulls designed to ride the waves gently, sails arranged to catch the wind efficiently, and crews following precise, calm routines that maintained health, rest, and mental focus. Voyages extended across distant waters, not for conquest, but for exchange. Seeds, minerals, crafted goods, and knowledge traveled alongside measured conversation, shared meals, and quiet observation of ocean rhythms. Trade networks formed slowly, linking Atlantis with distant coasts where relationships were grounded in mutual respect, patience, and deliberate cultural exchange. Foreign communities learned irrigation techniques, architectural practices, and philosophies of balance without losing their own identities, forming connections built on shared understanding rather than domination. Goods were exchanged with care, knowledge transferred thoughtfully, and the rhythm of commerce mirrored the city's gentle daily pace, reinforcing calm interaction across the seas. Atlantis leadership councils maintained oversight over resources, trade, and population growth, ensuring that no district prospered at the expense of another, and that the city's long-term stability remained central to every decision. Public infrastructure expanded carefully, canals were reinforced, bridges strengthened, gardens and plazas enlarged, and learning centers improved. Prosperity was shared and integrated into the life of the city rather than concentrated in the hands of a few, reinforcing a social harmony that reflected the rhythms of nature and the city's architectural order. Yet, as the city prospered, subtle shifts began to emerge. Pride and comfort quietly replaced humility and restraint. New architectural projects favored grandeur over functional simplicity, ceremonial spaces grew larger, and bridges and plazas were built to impress visitors as much as to serve practical needs. While none of these changes were abrupt or aggressive, they introduced slight imbalances into a culture that had relied on meticulous symmetry and thoughtful moderation for centuries. In governance, some council members began exploring opportunities to extend influence, regulate distant trade territories, and formalize strategic advantage, arguing that such measures would protect the city and ensure lasting recognition. Although framed as protection and foresight, these ideas slowly introduced hierarchy, subtle competition, and comparisons with outsiders into a society that had long prized equality and collaboration. The seeds of ambition, though mild, began to grow quietly, altering the internal rhythms of decision-making and introducing imperceptible tension beneath the surface of calm daily life. Environmental cues continued to whisper subtly to the people of Atlantis. Slight shifts in tides, minor tremors beneath the foundation, and gradual variations in coastal sediment patterns hinted at change, but these signals were largely ignored or explained as ordinary cycles. Confidence in centuries of stability led citizens to trust in continued balance, overlooking early signs of misalignment between human structures and natural forces. Despite these subtle transformations, life continued with the gentle cadence that had defined Atlantis for generations. Harvests remained abundant, music floated softly across plazas and gardens, and residents carried out daily tasks with patient attention, seemingly unaware that undercurrents of change were gradually reshaping the foundations of both society and environment. The city appeared eternal, luminous, and admired, while quiet internal shifts set the stage for the more profound changes yet to come. In this way, prosperity in Atlantis was both a blessing and a precursor, a gentle reminder that even in societies built on balance, gradual shifts in intention, ambition, and environmental alignment can unfold slowly, unnoticed, and without immediate disruption, preparing the city for the next chapter of its story. As the years passed, the prosperity and gentle rhythm of Atlantis remained outwardly calm, yet subtle shifts began to ripple through the culture, almost imperceptibly, like tiny currents beneath a smooth lake. Habits that had long reinforced humility and mindfulness softened slowly. Comfort replaced discipline in certain quarters, convenience replaced attentive effort, and even the careful attention to natural cycles began to waver, often without conscious recognition. These changes were gradual, almost invisible, yet their accumulation would slowly reshape the city's inner balance. Architectural projects began favoring visual impressiveness over pure functionality. Taller towers, broader ceremonial spaces, and ornamental structures emerged, demonstrating skill and wealth rather than purely supporting communal needs. While the designs remained elegant and harmonious in appearance, the long-term maintenance demands increased quietly, stretching labor and material resources, yet few noticed because the beauty of these constructions drew admiration rather than scrutiny. Within governance, council discussions began to shift toward influence beyond the island, exploring formalized trade control, strategic alliances, and broader territorial presence. Proposals were framed as measures of protection, stability, and cultural guidance rather than ambition, yet slowly, subtle competition entered the leadership, changing the foundation of decision-making. Respectful cooperation remained the dominant culture, but tiny cracks of comparison, pride, and desire for recognition began weaving into daily governance. Environmental signs appeared gently, almost like whispers, slight changes in tidal behavior, minor tremors beneath settled stone, shifts in rainfall timing, and irregular patterns in marine life migration. Observers documented these variations carefully, yet most were dismissed as natural cycles. Confidence in centuries of stability and tradition masked the significance of these signals, leading many to assume that balance would continue automatically. Daily life continued smoothly, but interpersonal behaviors shifted quietly. Citizens measured success by outward symbols, possessions, social recognition, and influence rather than alignment with communal values. Even spiritual centers experienced subtle change. Ritual became more about form and appearance, meditation and reflection shortened, and silent contemplation became less frequent, replaced by structured ceremony that reinforced routine rather than internal harmony. Meanwhile, the natural world responded slowly. Springs altered their flow slightly, coastal sediment patterns changed, and certain marine species modified breeding or migration habits. These adjustments, though minor and often unnoticed, were accumulating, reflecting the gradual influence of human activity and the subtle stresses of an evolving environment. Through decades of gentle accumulation, Atlantis remained outwardly calm, visually unchanged, and psychologically reassuring. Music still echoed across plazas, markets functioned smoothly, and daily work proceeded in measured rhythms. Yet beneath this serene exterior, the foundations, both literal and metaphorical, were shifting. Small imbalances in architecture, governance, and human behavior began intersecting with environmental variation, creating a slow drift from the once perfect equilibrium of the city. The decline was not abrupt or dramatic. It occurred in layers, social, cultural, environmental, and structural, intertwined and quiet, so that the island's inhabitants remained largely unaware. Like water flowing imperceptibly around hidden rocks, Atlantis was slowly moving toward a threshold, a turning point where long-accumulated minor shifts would eventually converge into transformative change, the consequences of which would unfold in subtle but irreversible ways. Even as this quiet decline unfolded, the city maintained its familiar outward rhythm. Life remained abundant, work remained purposeful, and the canals, gardens, and plazas continued to exude their usual calm. And so, the city moved forward, seemingly unchanged, while beneath the surface, the first threads of transformation were weaving a delicate, invisible tapestry, preparing the stage for the events that would define its ultimate fate. As the subtle shifts of society continued, the island itself began responding in quiet, imperceptible ways. Beneath the stone foundations and gently flowing canals, slow tectonic movements shifted the ancient plates that had rested in balance for centuries, releasing vibrations too faint to be heard, yet steadily reshaping the structural equilibrium of the land. Water channels carried currents that changed ever so slightly, altering nutrient distribution in coastal waters and influencing marine life migration patterns, all without disrupting the apparent calm of daily life. Atmospheric patterns adjusted gradually, with soft changes in wind direction, humidity, and cloud formation influencing rainfall and evaporation. Crops continued to grow, yet small shifts in moisture levels required increased attention from farmers. Canal systems were carefully managed, reinforcing a sense of control, yet the natural cycles were slowly moving beyond the parameters for which the original infrastructure had been designed. Within the city, scholars and observers documented astronomical movements, tidal changes, and minor seismic activity, accumulating data over decades. Yet cognitive bias toward continuity led them to interpret anomalies as minor deviations rather than early warnings. Confidence in centuries of balance and success discouraged proactive intervention, while small environmental shifts quietly accumulated, preparing the ground for more profound change. The soil beneath the central plateau gradually compressed under subtle weight redistribution. Subterranean water reservoirs shifted in volume and direction, loosening sediment layers and slightly altering the balance of foundations supporting bridges, buildings, and canals. These changes were imperceptible day to day, but over years, their cumulative effect became a slow, invisible drift away from equilibrium. Even marine life subtly adjusted to these changes. Fish and other sea creatures altered their breeding patterns, diving behavior, and nocturnal activity, yet humans interpreted these as ordinary variation rather than a reflection of environmental stress. Biological systems often detect shifts before humans are consciously aware, and Atlantis residents remained largely unaware of the latent instability emerging around them. Gradually, these microadjustments, tectonic, oceanic, atmospheric, ecological, and biological, synchronized into a broader phase shift. Foundations weakened incrementally, water flows shifted subtly, and sediment settled in ways that would later influence structural stability. These changes occurred over decades, invisible on a daily scale, yet significant over the long term, like a slow-moving tide reshaping the coastline while appearing calm from a distance. City infrastructure, though carefully maintained, began to experience compounded stress. Bridges, canals, and buildings absorbed minor vibrations and pressure changes, spreading internal tension incrementally. Maintenance crews addressed visible wear, yet long-term stress accumulated below their notice, quietly undermining structural stability. Socially, the culture continued to embrace comfort, stability, and subtle prestige. Citizens remained polite, markets functioned smoothly, and music drifted softly across open spaces. Yet subtle competition, status comparison, and shifting priorities were slowly eroding communal balance, mirroring the imperceptible transformations occurring in the natural environment. Through all these changes, Atlantis maintained its calm exterior. Life proceeded peacefully, routines continued unbroken, and the city seemed as timeless and harmonious as ever. Yet beneath the surface, both human intention and natural systems were slowly diverging from the delicate alignment that had sustained centuries of balance. Small, steady forces were quietly setting the stage for transformation, waiting for a moment when accumulated changes would converge, not with sudden force, but through persistent, measured progression, like a tide gradually filling a basin until water flows over its edge. And so, the long turning of nature continued, silent, patient, and relentless, moving beneath the visible tranquility of the city, weaving countless subtle adjustments into a converging trajectory, preparing Atlantis for the transformations that would unfold in the chapters yet to come. The night arrived over Atlantis with a quiet, deliberate grace, the sky deepening to velvety blue and stars twinkling softly like distant lanterns guiding calm reflection. The city's lights glimmered gently along canals, pathways, and plazas, mirroring the serene pattern of the heavens above. Citizens moved slowly, finishing evening rituals, pausing occasionally to gaze at reflections on water, feeling the subtle rhythm of life around them. All appeared unchanged, yet beneath the surface, the foundations of the island were beginning to shift in ways imperceptible to daily perception. Tectonic pressure that had been building for decades slowly reached a tipping point. Mineral layers and sediment beneath the central plateau shifted incrementally, sending low-frequency vibrations through stone foundations and canal walls. These vibrations were nearly silent, subtle enough to be absorbed into the ambient noise of flowing water and soft wind. Yet they subtly altered the rhythm of the city's structure, like a heartbeat slowing beneath the surface of calm, visible life. Residents slept, their bodies sensing gentle oscillations as faint drifting sensations in dreams. The nervous system registers these shifts before conscious awareness, blending movement into dream imagery, floating, swaying, and drifting along soft, imagined currents. The city, asleep or awake, seemed to move with a rhythm that mirrored these imperceptible shifts. Subterranean water channels responded first. Slight surges began along canal systems, pushing water incrementally toward embankments, shifting sediments in soft, undetectable pulses. Surface canals reflected the moonlight, appearing unchanged, yet subtle eddies and variations hinted at the deeper activity below. Foundations adjusted slowly to these flows, each stone and pillar absorbing tension with almost imperceptible motion. The ocean, too, began to participate in this quiet transformation. Coastal waters, previously stable, shifted slightly in depth and current, moving inward along gentle gradients. Tides synchronized with subsurface adjustments, producing a rhythm so slow that the human eye would barely notice, yet cumulatively powerful, influencing canal levels, shoreline sediments, and the long-term stability of embankments. Atmospheric conditions responded with minute barometric changes. Wind shifted in delicate patterns, carrying slightly increased humidity, soft clouds formed and drifted more slowly, and the evening's air grew heavier, warmer, and denser. The environment itself seemed to exhale in preparation for the changes below, and the city moved in synchrony, unaware of the slow convergence of forces unfolding beneath its calm surface. Within the central plateau, subtle settling of sediment layers occurred. Buildings, bridges, and plazas absorbed micro-adjustments, distributing tension across structures. No abrupt collapse occurred. Instead, every movement was gentle and continuous, preparing the city for the larger transformations yet to arrive. The rhythm of water, wind, and stone remained coherent, producing a quiet symphony of gentle sounds that whispered through sleeping districts. By the early hours, slight rises in canal water gently overtopped low embankments, spreading softly into walkways and peripheral plazas. The movement was slow enough that citizens, waking gradually, noticed without panic, adjusting their steps and shifting possessions toward higher ground in a calm, orderly manner. Boats were repositioned with care, pathways cleared, and the city's rhythm remained deliberate and unhurried. The night continued, and with each hour, the subtle convergence of tectonic shifts, water flows, and environmental adjustments grew more pronounced. Yet all happened with gentle continuity, without abrupt drama, preserving calm awareness for those within the city. The island itself seemed alive, breathing slowly, adjusting naturally, and preparing for a broader, irreversible change that had been set in motion centuries before. In this quiet convergence, Atlantis demonstrated the principle of slow, inevitable transformation. Forces accumulated patiently over decades, synchronized across multiple systems, and prepared to express themselves gradually rather than violently. The city's people, unaware of the underlying processes, experienced the transformation as part of the natural rhythm of life, their calm, deliberate actions blending seamlessly with the unfolding changes in their environment. And so, the night of shifting earth and rising water passed, not with chaos, but with measured continuity, a gentle prelude to the more visible submergence and transformation that would mark Atlantis' passage from civilization to legend. As dawn slowly spread its pale light across the transformed horizon, Atlantis began to reveal the quiet effects of the night's subtle shifts. Water levels in canals and along shorelines had risen incrementally, spreading gently into low-lying plazas, gardens, and workshops. The movement was deliberate, almost meditative in pace, allowing residents to respond calmly, repositioning boats, moving possessions to higher ground, and guiding livestock with patient care. No panic erupted, life continued in a rhythm as deliberate as the ocean itself. The central plateau remained temporarily stable, serving as a refuge for citizens and council gatherings. From this elevated vantage, the extent of gradual submergence became visible. Peripheral districts, once bustling with activity, now reflected sunlight off shallow waters, transforming streets and courtyards into quiet channels. The city's geometry, canals, plazas, and bridges, remained intact in appearance, even as the ground below adjusted imperceptibly, slowly reshaping Atlantis into a hybrid of land and gentle, flowing water. Marine currents adjusted, redistributing sediment along the newly inundated perimeters. These slow movements reinforced the gradual erosion of low embankments, yet the pace was soft enough that structural collapse did not occur. Foundations settled like a patient exhale, stones shifting only slightly, distributing weight evenly to minimize abrupt stress. Water, though steadily encroaching, maintained its calm, mirror-like surface, reflecting the city's architecture with gentle fidelity, preserving beauty even in transformation. Daily life adapted seamlessly to these changes. Citizens learned to navigate shallow waterways where streets once lay, moving goods, tending plants, and interacting socially with the same calm deliberation as before. Commerce continued with soft tones and slow movement, reflecting the persistent cultural emphasis on mindfulness and balance. Children observed the transformation with curiosity, walking carefully along raised paths and learning, even in this shifting environment, that adaptation is a natural, gentle process. Over successive days, tidal cycles synchronized with water redistribution across the island. Groundwater reservoirs, previously separate, interconnected with surface waters, subtly increasing submergence across the outer districts. While structures and pathways remained usable for the moment, the city's long-term stability gradually exceeded the capacity of engineering and design, signaling an inevitable transition toward complete integration with the surrounding ocean. Cultural practices continued in quiet adaptation. Music floated softly across flooded plazas, songs adjusted to flowing water rather than hard surfaces, and rituals moved onto higher terraces. Meditation and reflection were increasingly aligned with the rhythm of tides, the whisper of wind, and the soft patter of rainfall on raised roofs. Life's pace, as always, remained deliberate, reinforcing the psychological calm necessary to inhabit a world slowly integrating with the ocean. By the time all residents evacuated the lowest districts, the city had transformed into a partially submerged mosaic of water and stone. Ships carried the last citizens, artifacts, and cultural knowledge toward neighboring coasts, while those remaining observed the quiet encroachment of water over former streets and gardens. Stone structures, bridges, and temples persisted just above waterline briefly, giving the appearance of calm continuity before settling fully beneath the reflective surface. The sea absorbed Atlantis slowly. Coral colonized submerged tiles, marine creatures navigated former streets and canals, and sediment covered previously exposed surfaces, integrating the human footprint into the natural rhythm of the ocean. The city's memory remained, not in destruction, but in subtle, enduring presence, its geometry, stonework, and canals preserved beneath gentle currents, waiting to be sensed by future explorers or imagined by human consciousness. Even as Atlantis became fully submerged, the environment retained a quiet balance, tides flowing and receding with regularity, marine life adjusting naturally, and the waters above reflecting the sky, stars, and faint glimmers of what once was. The story, though no longer visible on the surface, persisted in subtle echoes, in sediment layers, in marine ecosystems, and in human memory passed across generations, forming the basis of the legend that continues to inspire curiosity, reflection, and wonder. Thus Atlantis did not vanish suddenly or violently, it transitioned with deliberate calm, leaving behind a legacy of integration, subtlety, and quiet endurance, a city that persists as an underwater echo, both historical and mythic, inspiring imagination while allowing the mind to rest in gentle contemplation. Now, as the mind drifts slowly through the long memory of Atlantis, imagine each detail blending seamlessly with calm awareness, each element of the city dissolving gently into imagination. The sunken streets, submerged plazas, and quiet canals lie beneath the ocean like a preserved memory, where the light of the stars filters through water and soft currents ripple across stone foundations. Every reflection, every shimmer of light upon the water, carries the echo of human intention, ingenuity, and delicate harmony with nature. Though the city is no longer visible above water, it exists quietly in thought, in dreams, and in the collective memory of civilizations. Atlantis continues as both metaphor and legacy, representing aspiration, balance, and the impermanence of human structures. It reminds those who consider its story that careful planning, patience, and alignment with natural rhythms foster longevity, whereas subtle misalignments, accumulated over decades, can gradually transform even the strongest foundations. The city's lessons extend gently across time. Scholars, storytellers, and explorers study the legend with curiosity and mindfulness, interpreting ancient texts, submerged formations, and cultural echoes. Each observation, each reflection, becomes an act of slow meditation, connecting the human mind to history, imagination, and the ongoing processes of nature. The rhythm of Atlantis, once embodied in canals, plazas, and gardens, now flows through thought and memory, softening mental tension and encouraging reflective calm. Consider the waters themselves, moving above the sunken city. They breathe with the tides, responding to lunar influence and underwater currents, caressing stone streets and arches, distributing life, and maintaining subtle balance. Coral spreads across tiles, fish navigate the channels, and sediments layer softly over buildings. The city is neither destroyed nor entirely forgotten, it has transformed into a quiet ecosystem, a living memory that interacts with both nature and human awareness. As you follow the flow of water, the echoes of human life ripple gently through the ocean, from the careful hands of artisans to the slow footsteps of citizens across plazas and bridges. Even submerged, Atlantis continues to inspire reflection on patience, harmony, and the integration of human endeavor with the environment. Every slow detail, stone, water, wind, coral, and human memory, reminds the mind of the beauty of gradual processes, the endurance of thoughtful design, and the wisdom of deliberate pacing. In this serene landscape, let your thoughts drift freely. Imagine moving slowly through quiet plazas, floating above gentle canals, listening to the soft pulse of water against stone, and sensing the echo of centuries past. The city exists as a space of calm reflection, a reminder that transformation is continuous, subtle, and often imperceptible. Knowledge, wisdom, and cultural memory endure quietly, leaving space for contemplation, meditation, and peaceful understanding. Atlantis now resides fully in imagination and consciousness. Its lessons, reflections, and echoes remain accessible to those willing to observe slowly, breathe deeply, and integrate awareness with curiosity. In this mental space, the city is eternal, not through physical presence, but through enduring influence on thought, reflection, and gentle understanding. As this story concludes, allow the mind to settle, breathing in rhythm with the imagined tide, releasing tension with each exhale, and resting in the calm echo of a city that moves with time rather than against it. The sunken streets, temples, canals, and plazas drift softly into memory, leaving a lasting impression of quiet harmony, measured reflection, and enduring mystery. Atlantis remains an underwater bridge between history and imagination, a space for serene meditation and the gentle exploration of human aspiration. And now, let this final vision of Atlantis dissolve softly into your consciousness, leaving only calm, curiosity, and the tranquil understanding of subtle, persistent forces, both human and natural, that shape history, life, and imagination, offering perfect closure for reflection, rest, and sleep. Hi everyone, thank you for joining me on this calm journey through the lost city of Atlantis. I hope you enjoyed drifting slowly through its canals, temples, and quiet streets, feeling the gentle rhythm of the city and the ocean. If you liked this story, don't forget to give it a like, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more relaxing, immersive history and mystery stories. Good night, Tata, bye dear. Let your mind rest, drift with the waves, and sink into calm sleep as the echoes of Atlantis carry you softly through dreams.